I am excited to welcome everyone here. I'm Lily. I'm the founder and CEO of Auggie. I also have a 4-year-old and an 8-week-old, and so I'm right there in it with you. And now I cannot believe I have an 8-week-old and I'm going to blink and be starting solid. So I see a lot of people have kids 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and I see that you're writing in. That's amazing. And so, yeah, I need all of these questions answered. And I'm excited to welcome our amazing panelists for Starting Solids 101. One thing, this event will be recorded. You can use the chat to ask Q&A questions, and I'll do my best to get to them. We probably will not get to all of them. So we usually follow up with an email addressing them. So look out for that. And without further ado, Kary, why don't you kick us off with an introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Kary Rappaport. I am a pediatric occupational therapist by training. I've been doing this work for over 20 years, specializing almost the entirety of my career in infants and toddlers eating. I currently work for Solid Starts. We are an online company and app that helps families start solids safely and learn how to serve any food you can think of to your baby when they start solids. I have two children of my own. They are a little bit older now, 9, and my daughter's turned 13. And I use these approaches that we talk about in Solid Starts and that we use in our app and in our work with my own children who are phenomenal eaters at this point. I love talking about this topic. I go on and on and on. Lily and Manasa will have to rein me in. That's the overview of my who I am.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kary. You are such a wealth of knowledge in this space, and I love learning from you. Hi,
Thanks.
Manasa. How are you?
Hi, good to see you guys again, and all of the like the hundreds of parents on the call today. So hello, everyone. My name is Manasa Mantravadi. My youngest patients call me Dr. M because it's easier. And I am actually a pediatrician by training, trained in pediatric endocrinology, and then actually transformed my career into really a culinary medicine, food as health career. I launched a company called Ahimsa. It's a line of stainless steel dishware for kids that are really mealtime tools to help them learn healthy eating habits at a very early age and to decrease the exposure to the harmful effects of plastic in a lot of the foodware. So that's kind of why I launched this company. But really, I'm kind of the same way. I love all things mealtime, and I think it's the best investment you can make in your child. And I see it kind of long term as a pediatrician. And so, and I've seen it for my own kids. Kary and I have similar age children. I have a 9-year-old and twins who are 12. And we often talk about how they are phenomenal eaters, but it's a lot of that kind of early investment that can feel really overwhelming, but there is an ROI. I think we are simultaneously really experiencing it now. So it's really exciting to kind of share both kind of the medical knowledge and clinical knowledge along with just parental advice and being in
Yeah,
the
and I
trenches with you
love
all.
I love the take you bring into it, and we'll talk about spices and get your opinion on all of that because you are so good at explaining that. All right, let's get into the conversation. So we're gonna start with knowing when your baby is ready, and I think this is one of the most common questions we see on Augie. So, how do you know your baby is actually ready to start solids? Kary, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So the predominant advice for a long time was age-based. So people would say things like, your baby's 6 months old, it's time to start solids, or your baby's 4 months old, it's time to start solids, depending on the medical institution you talk to and the person that you talk to. Currently, the recommendations are very much about development. You're looking for a baby to show certain developmental skills that tell you they are ready to start solids. The skills that we're looking for, and there's basically just 3 big ones, are that your baby has the ability to sit up.
Great.
Doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to sit completely independently. If you sit them up, they can topple over or topple to the side a little bit, but you don't want that rounded spine, head falling forward. If you give them some help, you give them a little support at their trunk or their hips, they should be able to keep their body for the most part upright. That's one.
And that can be on your lap.
Totally. It can be in a boppy pillow. It can be, they sit upright in the high chair, but when you put them on a flat surface, they tipple over. It can be on your lap. All of those things are fine. Two is that your baby has the strength to reach out and grab things in front of them and pick them up and bring them to their mouth. So if
Right.
baby has nice, strong sitting skills, that gives them support at the shoulders to be able to reach out, grab things, and bring it to the mouth. Once your baby can do that, usually interest will follow. And that's the third piece, is that your baby is showing interest in what you're doing at the table. They're showing interest in the food. They are curious about the food moving from your plate to your mouth, and they want to get involved. When they're showing all three of those things, it tells you they're ready to start exploring a variety of solid foods.
Got it. Okay, that makes complete sense. And I guess, are there any signs that should be or could be misinterpreted as readiness?
People will talk sometimes about the tongue thrust reflex disappearing or certain small things that indicate baby's ready. A lot of times, baby will show interest at the table because they're interested in you. They want to look at your face, they want to see what's going on, but they're
Yes.
really sitting up well yet, and they're not able to reach out and grab. That's a really big one because it shows you that they have enough support at their trunk to support that reaching out and grabbing. Babies who are not quite stable in their trunk often will sit up, but they can't reach because as soon as they do, they lose their sitting ability and they kind of crumple because they are using all of those muscles just to keep themselves upright. What
That
we
makes
know from
sense.
the research is that most babies are showing that constellation of skills around 6 months old.
Okay.
Some babies, in my experience, will show those skills closer to 5 months old, and on the very rare occasion, around 4 months old, very, very rare. And then occasionally babies will show it closer to like 6.5 months, even almost at 7 months, but usually you see those skills coming around at 6 months.
Okay, and then Dr. M, as a pediatrician, you must be telling people when to consider starting solids all of the time. What's your advice for parents feeling pressured to start solids in quotes on time?
Yes. So if there's one thing I know about pediatrics is there is really there's no on time. There is a range, which is
Yep.
why we always talk about kind of the developmental milestones. And at some point in this range, your child should be hitting these developmental milestones. So I think again, traditionally speaking, when we were trained many years ago, it used to be like start solids at this certain age and do it in this certain way. And that really has gone to the wayside. All the research and evidence-based medicine has shown this. So I agree with Kary. It's like you start when your baby is ready. I think to your question earlier, what are some common misconceptions? Often I
Yes.
will hear teething, like, oh, my baby is teething. And so they're ready to start. And that's actually not that kind of truncal support and the developmental readiness of being interested in food. That's one common one that will hear on, oh, my baby has teeth, now they're ready. It's like, well, but if your baby has teeth and they can't hold up their head, they're actually not quite ready.
Yeah.
So I don't think, because again, when we talk about starting solids, and I know we might get into this, starting solids is really learning about eating, learning to kind of move your body, to explore, to be interested. It's not really about nutrition. And so when we talk about when is your baby ready, it's all those kind of physical signs, some of the developmental signs, and it's less about the nutrition that you're putting into them and this exciting new journey they're about to take and all the skills that will follow on how they're going to develop those to actually eat.
That makes sense. And someone's just writing in and they're saying, I'd like to hear more about showing interest. My baby watches us closely, but doesn't try to grab it from us.
Yeah, that might indicate that they don't have enough support in their trunk and their arms to do that, or that's just a more timid baby. I have worked with so many babies over the years who just really want to watch for a while, and it can be so tempting to try and hand it to them, put it in their mouth, rush them along, but those are babies that need to go at their own pace. They need us to be respectful of those cues and to just keep showing them this is safe, this is how I do it, and letting them watch and sort of participate in that way by smelling the food, by
Smell.
and by just seeing what's going on with the adult. That
I'm
sort
gonna
of,
mute everyone, I think, but then you two will have to unmute.
yeah, there you go. There we go. So that those sorts of things can come in time. If your baby is not developmentally stable in their sitting, that can impact interest. And sometimes baby is just temperamentally a little bit more hesitant to get started. And that often means just coming to the table, offering them the food in different ways, and then showing them how you do it and waiting for them to show that active engagement.
And we're going to get right into feeding styles. But first, when you are introducing solids, whatever style you choose to do you have to consistently do it? So should you be aiming to do it every day?
Yeah, so it is not important to do it every day because, like Manasa said, it is not for nutrition at
Yes.
first. Baby has this constellation of skills that they're trying to learn that help them eat the same foods that you eat. So they're going from only drinking breast milk or formula to now having to chew and figure out how to break down and move around and swallow these really complex foods. They need ample time to do that. So daily practice is good because the more we practice, the more likely baby is to develop those skills. It's
Yeah.
also why we like to get started around 6 months as soon as baby's showing readiness signs, as opposed to saying, oh, baby's showing readiness signs, but we'll wait to 8 or 9 months because now they're missing that daily practice during that time. But that said, it is 100% okay. And it's actually better to not practice on a day where baby is not into it. So if they're extra fussy, if they're sick, they're teething, they're just disinterested, or you've had a busy day, it is perfectly fine to skip solids that day. And it is also okay if that extends for several days in a row, maybe 4 days where you can't get to solids because baby is sick and not doing well. That is perfectly fine. And then you'll come back to the table and try again. It's better to do that than to try and force baby to practice a skill when they're not feeling their best.
And
And I think
Manasa,
it's
what? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's important for people to hear this over and over multiple times is that the first year of life, like 75% of their calories are coming from breast milk or formula,
Yeah.
right? And it's really at like 9 months, they're like starting to replace some of those. That I hope will make people feel like, okay, if they miss that day or if they miss those few days, your baby doesn't necessarily, like, they don't need it at that age for nutrition, for them to grow, for them to develop. And I think a lot of that stress of starting solids, you feel like I have to put this food in my baby's belly for them to grow and develop. So taking that pressure off to really, again, reframe that starting solids is about practicing the skills to then eventually, after the first year of life, intake enough nutrition to grow and develop should, I hope, make people feel less worrisome about how much their baby is eating.
It definitely makes me feel less worried because I remember with my first, I was so concerned. He would be exploring, playing, but I was like, is he swallowing? And I drove myself crazy. And so hearing from you both that really that's actually the goal is so reassuring. Um, okay, let's talk a little bit about feeding style. So there's a lot of information out there, and sometimes, as we all know, strong opinions around different feeding approaches. Can you walk us through the pros and cons of baby-led weaning versus spoon feeding or purees? And Kary, maybe just for everybody here, you could explain just like what baby-led weaning is.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, when you're starting solids with a baby, there are sort of two predominant approaches. There's what we call usually the traditional approach, which a lot of people are familiar with, where you start baby with a puree. Oftentimes it's rice cereal or a stage one Gerber type puree that's thin and watery, and it's similar to breast milk in its consistency. So it's kind of like a liquid, and you're spoon feeding baby that consistency. And then little by little, you're increasing in texture over time. So the recommendation is to move from that to, say, a stage two puree to a stage three that's more lumpy and has some chunks in it. And then eventually you're giving baby pieces of food, little pieces of food that they're picking up and they're bringing to their mouth and eating by themselves and learning to chew that way. That is
Mhm.
one approach to starting solids. That was kind of the only approach to starting solids for many decades over the past century. Not prior to that, but over the past century, it's been predominantly the traditional approach. In the past, say, really 10 years, but 10 to 15 years, the idea of baby-led weaning came on the scene. And
Yeah.
that is in alignment with how babies were fed for millennia. So it's not a new approach, it's just newly discussed and talked about in the medical community and amongst parents. But baby-led weaning is the idea that once baby is showing the developmental skills that me and Lily and Manasa were talking about a moment ago, they actually have the ability to explore a much wider range of textures than puree and moving forward from that. And that the research has actually showed us that that gradual increase in texture is not how babies learn to chew and how to swallow. That is
Yep.
an approach that it does just fine because babies are so flexible. And if you are nervous, it's a completely reasonable way to start things. But we know from the research now that babies actually need exposure to a variety of textures to learn to chew. It's not that they learn to chew and then you give them more texture. It's the texture of the food itself builds new chewing patterns in baby. So baby-led weaning sort of flipped that traditional method on its head a little bit and
Yep.
encouraged families to just jump right into bigger pieces of food and textured pieces of food so that baby could build those chewing skills early. That said, again, babies are extremely flexible. There is absolute value in serving baby purees. There's no reason to avoid that texture. That is not a bad texture for baby. In fact, it's a wonderful texture for baby. And it's a wonderful texture for adults. I love purees. I eat yogurt and hummus and guacamole and soups
Yep.
all the time. My family jokes that I'm like a geriatric because I almost exclusively want to eat soft.
And
Go ahead.
okay. I was just gonna ask Manasa, like when there are patients that you're seeing or the parents of patients, are there people that you recommend a puree to over baby-led weaning? Like, and if so, why?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's usually when we actually make referrals to our counterparts in OT. So if you're seeing, so when you go to your pediatrician, there are two things we're looking for, right? In those early days, especially, are they growing, right? Along,
Yep.
so not like really truly, are they growing along their own growth curve? Because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, my baby's not gaining weight, or oh, they're not eating enough. And really, what we look for is truly objective evidence that they are growing at the
A
rate that they're
curve.
supposed to be growing, a curve, exactly. And then are they hitting their developmental milestones?
Yes.
So, are they able to hold their head up? Are they able to put their hands to midline? Are they able to hit these normal kind of developmental milestones in the age range that we normally expect them? So, if we're hearing from parents that as we were doing our screening that they're not hitting some of those developmental milestones, or every time, let's say, they're bottle feeding or breastfeeding, we're having issues with kind of swallowing, or we're not really gaining the amount of weight that we need as your kind of baby is supposed to grow in the breast and bottle feeding. That's when we actually say, let's get an evaluation.
Yep.
Let's talk to our friends over in PT and really understand, is it kind of still within the normal range, or are we starting to see some kind of developmental issues that actually do need extra support for baby?
Yep.
And then we'll kind of send them over. And then I don't know, Kary, if you have any specifics on when we refer, what you actually see that necessitates, oh, you know what, these are at kind of outside that normal range, and here's what we could do.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. So I have been doing this for a very, very, very long time with a wide variety of babies. I worked for 10 years in Children's Hospital Los Angeles with some of the sickest and most developmentally delayed babies you can possibly find. And this approach, baby-led weaning, was an approach we used even with those infants,
Wow.
infants with cardiac defects, infants with cleft palates, infants with a variety of differences in the development, like Down syndrome or things like that. So it's an approach that can be used with a wide variety of babies, but occasionally there are babies who do struggle with baby-led weaning. And in
Yep.
my experience, it sort of again flipped the idea that, oh, all babies should do more of a traditional approach, and then some babies do baby-led weaning to having me realize, oh, baby-led weaning works for the vast majority of babies. Occasionally there are babies who need us to go slower, who need us to work a little bit more carefully through things. Sometimes babies who are born very prematurely prefer to start with blander foods and thinner textures, although not always. Sometimes those babies who have had a lot done to their face, a lot of tape, nasal cannula, NG tubes, things like that, maybe even being intubated, prefer the self-driven aspects of baby-led weaning. So
Hmm.
it's really more about babies who are super gaggy, like really intensely aversive, or who have some type of swallowing deficit where we might consider a traditional approach as the starting point and then moving forward from that. But it's the rarity. And I
And
will just reassure you also again, because I think somebody asked this, it is also perfectly fine to start with the traditional approach. It's
yes.
just that all babies need to move on to finger foods within the first few months. So it's not that that's a bad approach. It's just that it's not necessary to stay and move so slowly through that approach.
And I think this kind of goes back to a lot of things we always talk about is what is new is actually old. And what
Yeah.
we know is that a lot of what was old did really well. So, I mean, I always tell new moms when it comes to, like just in general, like new parents, they're so nervous, right? And you're counseling them on breastfeeding and bottle feeding and the diaper. And it's like, okay, let's all take a breath and remember there have been literally generations of mothers and fathers who have raised kids, and on the whole, like it's gone pretty well. It's okay,
Yeah,
and
we're
you
we're
know
here.
we're here, and generations of children have, and still now till this day around the world, eat with their hands, and they just eat what they're served, and so I think if we can again, so much of starting solids and just parenting is really bringing down kind of these what we feel like our expectations or these milestones that we have to hit, and just remember that what is old kind of got us through many generations. And so if we can kind of remind ourselves that, it again takes the pressure off.
People are asking when should their child be picking up the food with their hands and putting it in their mouth, opposed to like opening their mouth when a loaded spoon comes to their face.
Usually babies will show that interest and that skill around 6 months. But again,
Okay.
I'm with lots of families whose babies are not as eager to touch the food and really prefer when you hand it over. Babies are so smart. They realize very quickly sometimes that it's more efficient if you do that, and they get more in their belly and it's easier and it's nice. It feels good to be close with your caregiver. So sometimes babies will kind of get stuck in that pattern because they are smart enough to realize that it's great when they get fed, and they don't necessarily want to do it themselves, or they haven't realized yet that they can do it for themselves. So just slowing down, you feeding yourself and letting the food sit there, or handing the food over to baby after you've taken a bite, can kind of prompt them without really pressuring them, so that they kind of still get to go at their own pace.
Got it. And I want to get into allergens. I want to make sure that we have a lot of time to talk about that because I know there's anxiety there. But first, with foods that aren't allergens, how often should you be introducing them? Should it be like th like you're offering broccoli 3 times before you move on? Does that matter?
You want to answer that one, Manasa?
Yeah. So, I mean, we used to say, I know we're going to go into allergies, but we used to say, start with one. Wait, there's so many things we used to say, right, Kary? Like, there's so many things we used to say, and actually, it's more simple than that. It's just kind of trust your baby, be pretty logical. If something is not looking right to you, maybe pause and try again another time. So typically, you can kind of introduce new foods like all the time. And so it's a lot of introducing new textures, new flavors, and there's no set like we used to really say start with this, increase to this, and it became so regimented. That's why everybody has questions, right? But if you didn't have a book, if you didn't have kind of all these guidelines, you would probably just start serving your baby what you were eating, right?
Yeah.
Like in general, that's like what people do kind of around the world. So I think
Keep you
it's just more
borrowing in time
consistent.
here.
Oh,
I got
it's
it.
more the consistency. That's okay. It's more the consistency of just kind of introducing new foods. Now, when we get into the allergy section, we can kind of talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
differently. But I think the other one thing that I do want to point out, and Kary, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, it's introducing new foods and flavors and textures is a big part of this.
Oh,
Oh, oh,
we
don't know
can
what's
see your
happening.
screen. Somebody's sharing. I
Well,
don't
is that
know.
like hopefully maybe somebody like maybe it's a kid drawing a picture of broccoli if we're going to talk about it.
I don't
But I
know how
think
to undo this.
It's
So,
neat.
um, Pavindra, we see your screen.
this is
Alan
the
and
first.
Rachel.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the first.
Okay, let me figure this out, everyone. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. And I can talk about early kind of exposure to different flavors and
Yeah,
textures too. But Kary,
that
do
would
you
be
have any
great.
other thoughts on specifics on how you recommend like amounts and frequency? Because to me, it just really feels like, again, it's a lot of practice. So I don't like to prescribe exactly what your child needs to be doing daily. But I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a challenging one for parents who are so worried about baby getting in a very specific amount, but I feel like you did such a perfect job reassuring parents that it is not about getting in a quantity of solid foods. Your baby is learning to chew
Yeah,
solid foods so that when they are around 12 months and up, they have the skills to eat a wide variety of foods and to get the nutrients they need from those foods at that point. And again, 12 months is a general aim. That can be as early as 9 months, 10
yeah,
months, 11 months for some babies. It can be as late as 15, 16, 17 months for other babies who are still really trying to figure it out. But around 12 months, you start to see a shift where breast milk and formula take a back seat.
Yeah.
Solids take a front seat. So what we try and encourage families as best we can is to follow baby's lead. There is no amount that baby needs to eat
Yes.
at each meal. And what we're looking, even once baby starts to eat solids, is what they eat over the course of a week or even a few weeks
Yep.
at a time for that nutritional mix to balance out. So at first, baby may take 0 bites, or a lot of people were asking about spitting, not actually swallowing. So normal because they're going to get their
Yep.
bellies filled after the fact from breast milk and formula. They don't need to swallow that food. So the portion size is really just responding to baby. 1 piece is fine. They want more, 2 pieces. They want more, three
Yeah.
pieces. There's no need to withhold food, but you don't want to overwhelm them with too much food.
got it.
Right. And I think when we talk about, and that'll piggyback on, we talked about baby-led weaning, lots of different textures. The one thing that I feel like specifically in this country, I'm from, my family's from India, and we introduce a lot of flavors
Oh, I'm
and
so glad
exposed
you're
to
going to talk about this.
flavors.
Yes.
Yes. Because I think, what I see later on, right? Like, a lot of people come to their pediatrician about picky eating or they're not growing. Well, it turns out, guess what? Most children are actually growing and most kids are actually just doing what they're supposed to.
Yep.
And it's not really that they're picky eaters. It's just that they are starting to exert control when they're two and try to, it has nothing to do with their ability to eat or their desire to grow, like eat and their
Yeah.
ability to grow. And so I think one of the best ways to do things early on, especially as you're starting, is to expose to different textures, like Kary said, but also to different flavors. And that's actually from a scientific perspective, babies are really ready to learn those different flavors. And even what you eat in pregnancy, I used to eat Asian pears. You guys, when I was pregnant
Oh
with
my
twins,
God, I love an
I
Asian pear.
Oh my God. And I would like my mother-in-law would send me crates of Asian pears. And my children till this day, like Asian pears. Like we are like it
It's
and
a
so
thing.
it's a thing. And actually they are exposed in utero to those flavors. So I think it's important to learn that to like make it feel okay for parents to you don't like who wants to eat a bland food? Like you can introduce these early flavors and textures early because of early exposure to all these diverse flavors, especially even bitter vegetables, reduces picky eating later. And they've kind of seen that in studies. So you don't necessarily feel like you have to make a gourmet meal now,
Yeah.
but it is, don't feel like you have to just have bland food for baby.
Got it. All right, let's get into the one we know everyone wants to hear about. So, allergies, what parents really need to know. Food allergies can be one of the most anxiety-inducing parts of starting solids. What should parents know about introducing allergens safely and confidently? Maybe, Manasa, if you want to start with like when to introduce common allergens.
Yeah. I'll actually backtrack a little bit just so people can understand the
Great.
difference because I think a lot of times people think what's an allergy versus a food. So maybe I'll go into what like an intolerance versus like just a
Please.
regular old
Yes.
versus a reaction. And then I know Kary, we did this one time and you had such a great, you got all nine like in a row, like she was doing really well on the common allergens. So we can talk about kind of the old school thinking versus the new school. We can kind of divide and conquer.
Perfect.
So I think what's really important for people to understand is there's allergy and then there's just kind of like food intolerance. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important for people to understand because babies, they're much like rashes. Every baby gets a rash. Sometimes they look really weird and crazy, but they're really just normal and it's fine. The same thing with kind of feeding. Um, there are food kind of intolerances, and that's really more what I think about, like digestive, right? So they might be gassy, they might, are bloating, they might even have some like redness around their lips, they're
Mm.
uncomfortable. It's really a more discomfort reaction, and it's an intolerance versus an allergy. An allergy is actually when your body's immune system gets involved. So your body thinks it's responding appropriately to kind of the protein or the food that it's seeing, but it's an inappropriate reaction. And so that's why we get like this histamine release, and you get hives, and you get, real swelling, and you might get some like lots and lots of diarrhea and vomiting. Your gut is involved because it's kind of reacting. And of course, the really scary one is kind of the breathing, in which we have difficulty breathing. That's a big difference between when,
Yes.
like, and it's important to know, because what I know in pediatrics is there's so many things that are normal that don't worry me, that
Yeah.
worry parents. And then there are things that actually I get worried about that parents should know to look for.
Yeah.
And so
Definitely.
I think on the whole, food intolerance is a really normal thing, and I don't want people to kind of misinterpret that for a true food allergy. So a food allergy is a immune response to the food versus just kind of a digestive, like uncomfortable feeling for baby. And we used to think, and I'll let Kary take it from here, but we used to think that you should not introduce these allergens early on because it would actually increase their risk. It turns out all the studies, it was actually while I was in residency, and one of my attendings at Northwestern was instrumental in the LEAP
Wow, that's
study. Yeah.
awesome.
So I learned about it before the fact, before it was published, and it was like, oh, guess what? Children with kind of eczema and kind of allergies, if you introduce those allergens early, it is protective against future
Wow.
allergies. So I will let Kary kind of go into, maybe if you want to transition, what we used to think, what we do now, which is a little bit different, and then how to kind of do that with those specific allergens.
Yeah, absolutely. So now the recommendation is that we want to introduce food allergens, and there are nine. Like
Tell them to us.
we're gonna try. Here we go. Um, we have peanut, we have egg, we have dairy, wheat, soy, we have shellfish, finfish, we have sesame, and peanut. Did I say tree nut? I
No, you did. All right. Well, there's
egg.
eight, and we have
I said
nine.
egg. Okay, there are nine. There are nine common ones. Look in the Solid Starts app. We will tell you what nine they are. Sometimes they
I
like
think you got it. Peanut, egg, dairy, soy, wheat,
tree nut,
nuts,
Tree
seaweed,
nut.
fish,
finfish.
sesame. No, I
Yeah,
think you
yeah, we
got it.
got them.
Yeah,
Oh, we
you
got it.
got
We got it. Oh, shellfish.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So there are
so
nine of them. Those
yeah,
foods are way more likely than any other food to cause a food allergy.
right.
You can be allergic to other foods, but that's very, very uncommon compared to these nine foods. So for those foods, the studies that Manasa is talking about showed us that early introduction, around the time babies start solid, so around 6 months, and then consistently keeping those foods in baby's diet on a regular basis, and that the studies show around 2 times per week after you've introduced it, reduce the risk of developing a later food allergy, especially for egg, peanut, and dairy. Those three in particular have the strongest research. And it's very significant. It's not like a little reduction. It's like an 80% reduction in later development of food allergies. So it is a very wise thing to introduce those allergens early and often. There are babies who have a higher risk of developing food allergy. And really the two predominant things right now, and there's really just one predominant one and then a backup, but the primary thing that you're looking for is if your baby has severe eczema. If baby has severe eczema, they are considered at high risk for food allergies. So you would want to talk to your doctor and make sure that you're connected with a pediatric allergist before you start and that you have a good plan with that. The backup one is that baby has an existing food allergy, which most people who are starting solids don't know yet that your baby has an existing food allergy. But if they do have an allergy to one food, they're going to be more likely to have an allergy to other foods. So again, you really want to talk to your doctor about that. People often worry that they have a severe allergy, so baby might have an allergy, or that a sibling has a severe allergy, so baby might have a severe allergy. And the research is not really supportive of that. It's really those two things, eczema and baby has an existing food allergy. In those instances, the research actually suggests that those three common allergens might actually be it would be better off if you introduce those three even a little earlier, as early as 4 months for some babies who are considered at high risk, but under the support of your medical doctor. So in none of the research does it say skip those foods or wait on those foods. The research is actually clear that earlier might be better for some babies, but most babies around 6 months. You want to start with the common allergens. They do not have to be your first food. So you don't want to jump in with peanut butter day one, but you can introduce a few non-common allergens. And once you get your sea legs and you're feeling good, then start with something like peanut butter or egg or dairy, and then give baby at least 2 hours to look for any signs of a response. And Manasa, you said this already, but that would be things I
All right, I'm gonna mute everyone. We gotta go to webinar style. Okay. Hold on. Okay, we should. There we go.
Okay. All right. So you want to look for, I usually put it in 3 buckets. GI issues, so vomiting, diarrhea, gassiness, things like that. Skin issues, so they're itchy, they're rashy, they have hives, things like that. And then respiratory issues. So baby has swelling, they're having trouble breathing, they are looking lethargic, they're not looking well. If they have those symptoms, you want to call emergency services if they have multiple organ systems involved or it's looking severe. But after 2 hours, most babies who will have a reaction would have had the reaction, and then you can go ahead and try that allergen food again, or you can wait till the next day. So our allergist recommends 3 days in a row, a very small amount, increasing that amount little by little. We have a really beautiful guided experience in the app that tells you exactly how to do this and amounts that you can give baby to build up. And then after 3 days, if baby is looking good, no signs of an allergy, you would assume that baby is tolerating that food fine, and then you would go on and you would just keep those foods in the rotation.
And that's an important distinction, the 2 hours, because typically when we talk about kind of food intolerance versus allergy, it really is with like minutes to like about 2 hours. And actually, if your baby or child is having, one of those 3 systems, right? So the skin, the gut, and the lungs, we observe them in the hospital for that long, because typically that, in the ER, because it'll happen in those 2 hours. So what's important is, if you feel like your baby is gassy and it's 6 hours later, it's more likely to be intolerant. So I think it's just important, again, to understand what those symptoms look like, what the timeline looks like, and then what you should be doing in terms of emergency services versus continuing to watch them.
And we're getting this question a lot, and one of you can take it. Maybe Manasa, you go with what time of day is best to introduce these allergens.
Yeah. So I like to really recommend during the day, because, whether it's baby-led weaning, right, or introducing allergens, this should be a guided approach. Because remember, baby doesn't really know how to eat and baby has not seen certain foods before. So the best time, in my opinion, is we usually say, try to do it in the morning, kind of at lunchtime, just so you can be there observing for any type of reaction.
And your doctor office is open,
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
And you both kind of touched on this, but I do want just someone to say it explicitly again, because I'm seeing it in the chat a bunch. When do you call 911?
So we have a really beautiful article that you can find in our app that has pictures that make this very clear. Especially we have a variety of babies, so you can see reactions on different skin tones, which can be really helpful for people. But our allergist says if you have one system involved, so you just have a couple little hives, or you have a little bit of a GI upset, your baby seems gassy or fussy, their belly is bothering them, or like just one thing, you're probably okay. But the rating scale goes from mild reaction to severe reaction. There's no middle, there's no medium reaction. If you think it is not mild, it seems like it's moving, call emergency services.
Yeah.
You should always default to more like an overreaction with an allergy response than an underreaction. And if there are two systems involved, so they have a couple little hives and belly upset, that's two systems, call emergency services. You cannot go wrong, and let them know my baby had X food, egg, or they had some peanut butter and I'm worried they're having an allergic reaction. Please bring an EpiPen or bring epinephrine so that they have it just in case.
And Manasa,
And
somebody asked, do you recommend having some sort of medicine handy whenever we introduce these allergens? For example, Benadryl.
oh, that's a great question. I just want to piggyback really quick
Yeah.
on the two systems involved. That's actually how we define kind of a severe allergy. So that two systems, or in general, if your baby has any respiratory issues, call 911 immediately. Because
Yeah.
if your respiratory system is involved and maybe they're having GI, so it's either two systems, or if they are having any sort of respiratory
Yeah.
system issue, so they're having difficulty breathing, immediately call 911. And then what was the question? Benadryl.
Should you have
Yes.
Benadryl?
Yeah. So in general, Benadryl is a great one for the antihistamine response. Typically, you'll want to call your pediatrician, just because we typically want to know if your baby is having some sort of reaction, and we can guide you towards like the dosing of that. But Benadryl is a really good first kind of over-the-counter medicine to use. If you have an EpiPen for another child, or for, if that's available, and your child is having like truly a severe allergic reaction, specifically breathing, we often say call 911 and have them help you kind of through that, because epinephrine is a life-saving medication. So
Yeah.
that's why Kary had mentioned you kind of tell the EMS provider what's happening, so they really clearly know what to do immediately.
Perfect. I'm going to ask this one question on allergens, but if you have a specific allergy question, drop it in the chat now and I'll try to get to it. First, though, is it normal for allergies to happen while introducing an allergen a second time?
Go ahead, Kary. Because sometimes you will actually have it the second time and not have it the first time. It kind of depends on the load.
The unfortunate thing about allergens is that you can develop one at any time in your life, even as an adult. So it
That's
doesn't
right.
necessarily preclude baby from having an allergy to a food, even after you've introduced it 3 times. But in an abundance of caution, our allergist does recommend 3 introductions before you can sort of loosen up your vigilance around that food. But it is true that yes, an allergen can happen on the first introduction, and sometimes that sort of primes the body, and you might actually see that introduction on that allergic response on the second or the third introduction. So yes, it's why we recommend the 3 in a row, either within the same day, 2 hours apart, or over 3 days, so that you can kind of keep an eye on that. And somebody had asked this, I wanted to
Yeah,
add in.
please.
You can also introduce foods that you've already served to babies. So say you've given them 10 different foods that are not common allergens, and then you try egg. So you want to keep egg in for 3 days, but any of those 10 foods you can introduce alongside egg. So it's not just egg for 3 days in a row. You can also introduce a non-common food, a non-common allergen food. So say you're doing peanut butter one day, you can introduce a brand new food like banana, for example, to baby that is not a common allergen. You just wouldn't mix 2 common allergens on the same day that are new. So you wouldn't mix new egg and a new peanut butter on the same day, but you could mix, say, zucchini and egg on the same day, even though babies had neither one before.
Perfect. Okay. If your question is being asked in the chat and we already answered it, I'm going to skip it, but we will send the recording following this event. It's Manasa. Someone wants to know that you mentioned earlier, but she's not sure if she heard you correctly. Can you please clarify? Should we introduce vegetables and foods with different spices to prevent picky eating later on?
Yes. So in general, early exposure to flavors, to textures. Now, listen, there is no foolproof way to get
No.
your child to eat a broccoli. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you that this is perfect science, but
Soy
in
sauce works
general,
in my house, just FYI. Broccoli dipped in soy sauce.
yes. And so that's more of the thing, right? So we're talking about starting solids, but starting solids is just the start. This is a long-term game here, everyone. And so I think what's really important to know is exposing baby in the right environment, right? So sitting at the table together, modeling kind of that behavior of eating kind of varieties of food, different textures, different flavors, different spices. That's kind of priming their brain, their taste buds, their digestion, their motor kind of skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's really priming and training all of those things. And think about it. It's the same for us too, right? I mean, we might not like something the first time. And remember, for children, you might need to expose these vegetables specifically. You know, we're trained to eat sweets. Like we're trained, like that's why
Yeah.
your baby will eat the fruit, but not the vegetable. And that's kind of an evolutionary thing because, you know, bitterness could signal something that was dangerous. And so that's why it's like a continuous exposure. You might have to expose your child 8, 10, 15 times to a certain flavor or exposure to food
For
before
them
they
to
even
eat it.
accept
Yeah.
it. And so I think that's the other important thing, that this is a long game. You know, feeding is a long game. And again, Kary and I always talk about it is a constant investment of time and energy, patience and effort that you eventually see that ROI. So again, if your baby or if your child then is a picky eater, picky eating is really normal. It's a really normal developmental stage, and it's more about, you know, they're exerting control than their actual love of broccoli or hate of broccoli. And so, yes, introduce it early, and hopefully it decreases the chance that they won't, you know, be a picky eater. But I don't really even like that term picky eater because it really is a normal developmental thing to kind of start refusing different textures or flavors or foods that they might have even liked when they were a baby.
And I give this tip frequently when talking to parents that are starting solids and when we host this event. If you have a friend that has a kid around the same age as your kid and you want to cook for each other's kids and then swap foods, that's a great way to expose your child to something that you may not personally be cooking at home. So I did that with a friend of mine and it was so helpful. Getting a lot of questions about salt. When can we introduce salt? And then let's also, for fun, throw in sugar there. When can we introduce salt and then sugar?
Ooh, that's a fun topic.
So
Do
fun.
you first? I feel like as a doctor, maybe you go first and then I'll add context. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So when we think about salt, okay, so I always try to explain the why so people understand, right? Because I feel like in general, we have a lot of like numbers and like do it at this age and do it. But if people can understand the why, then
Yes.
it starts to feel like, oh, okay. And you're not so worried about the amounts and the how much and the when versus the why. So let's talk about salt. So salt, when a baby is born, your kidneys are still immature. Our kidneys are these, you know, these things that sit on the bottom part of our body, and they filter all of the fluid in our body. And so salt and water is what they're really responsible for. And when babies are born, their kidneys are still maturing, so they can't actually take a bunch of salt load. So in general, they don't need extra salt. A lot of people think that they need to salt their food, you know, for flavor and stuff. You don't need to, actually. When I was introducing solids for my kids, a lot of times what I would do is I would cook my normal food,
Yeah.
kind of leave out the salt, and then kind of add salt for me later or for the adults. So that's a great way of kind of introducing the same flavors without the additional salt load. Um, what's more important, though, than the addition of salt is kind of the hidden salt in a lot of the food that we kind of just happen to find in this particular country. And so that when you see, you know, you're looking at kind of pre-prepared food, or you're, you know, at the grocery store buying stuff, look at the salt content there.
Yeah.
And so that's really where a lot of the hidden salt from America comes, not because people are adding salt. So number one, like in general, babies do not need additional salt, because their kidneys really can't digest it, or they can't load it in the first place. Sugar. So the why behind kind of keeping out the sugar, I usually say at least a year. And so usually I like to avoid the sugar because, again, it is training kind of your taste buds to, I mean, who doesn't like sugar? I like sugar. It's like we're trained to like sugar. And so if your baby is consistently getting kind of a lot of sweet and sugar, they might not accept some of the other things that are a little bit more bitter, like the
Oh,
vegetables.
yeah.
And so again, understanding the why, and of course, like sugar load is another thing that again, they might then start having preferences for those added sugars. So again, look at the labels of even when your child's past that year, you're starting to go to the grocery store, or you're buying these different things. Added sugar and added salt are the two kind of labels you really kind of want to look for. That's why we always say fresh whole grains, fresh whole produce whenever you can. And also, when you're looking for processed food, just try to like really diminish those, because again, it's how their body is metabolizing salt, their body is metabolizing glucose, and then their early preferences for what they're going to then eat and accept later on. So that's my kind of like why. I don't know if your team talks about like specifics, Kary, but I always
No,
try to empower
I
people
love
with
that. I think just to add on to that, because we get so many questions about this one, there's a lot of anxiety about that kidney processing part. And I like to just point out a couple things. If you think about your baby coming to the table, most of you have already said this, they're spitting the food back out, they're chewing, they're spitting, they're
They're
not
not ingesting.
consuming a
Yeah.
large amount. So even if the food is salted to a normal amount, it is very, very hard for baby to ingest a lot of it right at first. Whereas if you think about coming and eating purees off of a spoon, you might get in 3, 4, 5 ounces of purees fed to a baby who's figured out how to swallow purees without much effort. So you can actually take in quite a bit of salted puree food, but it's much harder for baby to get in too much of a salted
That's
typical.
such a great point. Such a
So
great point.
and people get so worried, like, is my baby safe? I think that the distinction in my mind is like, your baby is safe, even if they eat a salty food. That's okay. They're not, it would be very, very hard for a baby to consume enough, even of pureed salted foods, which they should avoid because it's not good for their
Correct.
overall. It would be still hard for them to do that. And most of us have a sort of a natural cutoff where we're like, that's too salty. I don't actually like that. But I like especially want to think about how we're priming baby's palate over time to
Yes.
prefer salted foods and to then continue to want more salted foods and to slowly start to reject the other foods that aren't naturally salty. And same thing with sugar. It's not that it's going to harm them to have something sweet or a sweet treat in there. It's that it's so easy for babies to prefer those foods. They start to just push out other foods and an interest in exploring more subtle flavors and foods that tend to be harder to chew. Like if you think about it, meat is a very challenging texture for baby to learn to chew,
Yeah.
and usually not sweet. And oftentimes, if you're not oversalting it, it's not particularly salty. So baby has to have some natural motivation to keep trying and figure out how to chew it. Same goes for vegetables, especially raw vegetables. Very hard to chew, not a huge pop of flavor like you get from, other piece of hair mouth. Sorry. Hair is
It's
everywhere.
very on
Texture,
topic.
flavor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to take a practical approach where, in my experience, and I feel like you have really like said this multiple times, and I love it, Manasa, is that baby will learn to eat the flavors you serve to them.
Yeah.
And baby has huge potential, especially from 6 to 9 months, to learn to eat a wide variety of flavors, especially things that you might even be like, oh, I don't even think I can handle that. Babies at 6 to 9 months don't have a strong disgust response like we have, where we can see something and be like,
Right.
that's disgusting. I don't think I'd like that. They will put the shoe from, that you just wore outside all day. They'll put that shoe in their mouth. They'll pick up the dog toy and mouth that. They will pick up a spider or an old Band-Aid and put that
Yeah.
in their mouth because they don't yet understand that things shouldn't be in their mouth. So
The old
babies,
Band-Aid is
Right.
triggering for me because
oh
there
No.
was a situation.
one of my favorite things is to ask people what you found in your baby's mouth, and
Yeah.
the answers that you get are just like, oh, they're so terrible.
Not to go back to the choking aspect, but actually something that you've taught me, Kary, was so interesting that actually more babies end up choking from things in the household than food. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The research
Yes.
shows that babies under 12 months are more likely to choke on household objects and items than they are on food. So it's really important that we all know
Yes.
first aid, and people think that's because they're going to choke at the table, but that first aid will come in handy in a wide variety of settings that are not the table. So we just want to be aware of that.
And why
That's right.
do
Because
puppies?
babies are,
Oh, go
what's
ahead.
that?
No,
because they're actually exploring the world with their mouth. Like, so they're like an oral, like they are literally exploring the world with their mouth. And so what we see in the emergency room is, yeah, a lot of other things that have got in their mouths. And then not just the other thing too, that's why we always talk about baby proofing and child proofing when they are from infancy into toddlers, because they're discerning. They just kind of take whatever. And so,
they don't know
I
what
mean,
they don't know.
they don't know what they don't know. So household cleaning supplies are often at eye level. And so having those things, so it's not just like regular household items like the Band-Aid, but really, really dangerous items like the cleaner. So that's
Yeah.
why we talk about that.
Okay, I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to end with, does mealtime need to be stressful? And do either of you, or maybe both of you, have a tip to share for stress-free mealtime?
I think mealtime, so what I tell my kids, um, is mealtime, like food is love, right? Mealtime is love. It should not be, it's a place where we gather as a family and it is like, it should be this positive experience, right? It should be. And because like that's what you're doing. You're nourishing your child. You're spending time with your child. They're learning new skills. So mealtime, think about it as that. Don't think about it as, oh, it's scary. They're going to choke. They're going to gag. I'm doing too much salt. I'm not doing, I'm doing too much sugar. I'm, introducing the solids all wrong. Don't worry about that. Think like, this is my time. For food is a form of love and spending time
Connection.
together and connection. And so if you can really remember that, and that people have been feeding their babies for years, and children have been eating foods for generations, it really starts to make mealtime what it is a really mindful and beautiful kind of moment for a family. So
I
it
love
shouldn't
that.
be stressful. Mealtime should be fun.
I love that. Kary?
I love that so much. That's beautiful. Food is love. Yeah, I agree. It should not be stressful. It often is stressful because this is, we live in a modern world, so it happens. Um, Trying to make mealtime enjoyable for yourself first and foremost. This is a little hack that I did early on for myself, which was I will choose foods that I love and bring them to the table and share them with baby. So if baby
Yeah.
rejects them, if baby doesn't eat them, they're not interested, they throw it, well, I will still be enjoying my meal.
Yeah.
The brain chemistry that is forming for baby when they're connected with you and enjoying being at the table with you is so powerful. It will keep them coming back again and again, which will help them learn to eat a wide variety of foods. All of the other things, like I think somebody asked about, does it have to be 100 foods? Is that too stressful to come up with 100 foods? No, we do not need to put those things on ourselves. Come to the table, serve foods with baby. Know that if you come to the table and you serve roasted broccoli that is roasted in a little bit of olive oil, some garlic and salt, now you've got 4 foods. You've already hit 4. It
Yeah.
actually adds
Congrats.
faster than you realize if you
Yeah.
start combining food and serving foods that you love to your baby.
Well, thank you both so much. I'm such a fan of Solid Starts and Ahimsa, and both of you will share more information on how you can reach these brands, as well as the event recording and a recap of the conversation over email. And good luck, and you got this.
You
Thank
got that. I was going to end
you.
on that too. You got this,
We
parents.
got this. Thank you, Dr. M and Kary. We will talk soon.
Love this, Lily. Thank you.
Bye.